For round 5, the Tata Steel Masters went on tour. They played not in Vaikanze, which is on the coast of the North Sea coast, but they went on tour to Hilversum, which is a town, well, a little to the east of Vaikanze. It's possible that left the players a little bit tired. Also, this is the 5th day in a row that they've been playing, because there were so many blunders today. Let me just give you a few examples of this. First of all, the game between Peter Svidler and Hou Yifan. So it's a pretty normal Queen's Gambit type position. You can see this very familiar pawn structure here and here. And Svidler played b5, so he's managed to carry out this typical minority attack. Obviously can't be taken here because of the pin, so c takes b5, and by pushing that pawn you can see that this d pawn has been isolated and also the c file is open. So you know that's a nice transaction for white. And now the best thing for black to do is to put the queen back on d8, but instead Yifan played bishop d7, which should lose immediately. Svidler exchanged queens, and now bizarrely after precisely 12 seconds he played rook b1 and the game careered on, but he could have just won an exchange with knight c8. The point is this: if the rook goes back, then knight b6 forks 2 pieces, very simple, and if rook e6 covering the b6 square, then simply knight g5, attacking the rook, and the rook simply doesn't have a good square to go to, because if rook c6, then knight e7 forks king rook. I mean, a terribly straightforward win, but instead Svidler played rook b1. Now he wanted to attack this pawn here, provoke this pawn to move, and that means this bishop is somewhat shut out of play. And you know, white has some initiative here, but black should be able to hold the balance. This is a good move. You can see that, well, if there's a trade, then this knight is going to be in trouble on d6. So Svidler, after, well, a 5-minute thought, played rook here and simply gave up a pawn. But that means that the rook can enter into black's position. There's pressure on f7. So Svidler sacrificed a pawn, but he has pretty decent compensation, and actually here he can force a draw if he wants to. He repeated moves a couple of times, but then, well, then he decides to play on. All his pieces are active. These minor pieces are not well placed. So yeah, and there are plenty of targets to attack. So decent compensation. Nevertheless, this should be okay for black. Perhaps the best move is rook e6, and this seems sensible. It means that if white wants to guess anywhere, then you know you've got to trade pieces, maybe knight b7 or something, and I mean the position should be about equal. But instead Yifan, well, running a bit short of time, played d4. I mean, I think the idea is that, excuse me, after, well, let's say, well, g4 was played, the knight came back, and this has broken up white's pawns, and yeah, again, this should be enough for black actually to hold the balance. I mean, white is still better here, but Svidler played a very interesting move actually. Instead of taking the pawn, he played e4, which keeps more tension in the position. I mean, it's a risk because this passed pawn remains on the board, but actually probably a good decision playing e4 to keep more tension. Knight e8 probably best, just to try and trade pieces, but rook e6. And now Svidler could have played rook c8 check. And then g5, an interesting move, because if rook takes knight, e5 is very attractive, and suddenly, Well, that's a very, very unpleasant fork. Remember, the king can't step back here. So knight h5, and now white wins an exchange like this. Now, there is still a lot of work to do if white is going to win this. I mean, maybe black has enough to hold the position, but yeah, you can see the knight can come to f4. But still, white has decent winning chances. But instead of rook c8, Svidler played f4, which doesn't look bad. It's just the other line was more forcing. And now knight e8, certainly the best move, just to try and trade pieces, or certainly trading pieces. But no, b4 was played. And then rook c8. Pieces traded. e5. Now this is starting to get critical, though the kingside pawn mass is certainly very dangerous. And now the bishop comes to c4. But it's still not over. Tricky position, and Svidler should probably just take the exchange here. And he has some winning chances. Instead he played rook c7. Yeah, a more ambitious move. And Yifan blundered with d3. She should take on h3 and just give up a piece. But actually, she has a lot of pawns here, and the d3 pawn is very, very dangerous. So it's probably enough to hold the game. d3 was played, however, and this just loses instantly. Now white is a piece up. And it's not possible to take here, of course, because of a check. So d2 and rook d4, and that was the final move of the game. Well, obviously if queen, then this can be taken, and then the rook is on prise here. And if rook e5, well, that one wins again. So game over, basically. So I mean, I really don't know what to make of that game. There were so many mistakes, but it seems as though Yifan made the last one. So Svidler wins by the skin of his teeth. Moving on. Shahriar Mamedyarov against Fabiano Caruana. Of course, both of these players candidates. They'll be playing against each other in March in Berlin. Mamedyarov played a modest opening with white, but there's no doubt that he has the more comfortable position here. Because black's kingside pawns is a little bit damaged, so Caruana has to take care of his king. Also, for the moment, you know, white is better coordinated. You can see the rooks protect each other, whereas this queen gets in the way of black's rooks. And now I think Mamedyarov played well. This bishop is a strong piece, so Mamedyarov played knight d4, and then he just exchanged off these bishops. Excellent move. And now knight c4. Yeah, having said all that, what's nice about white's position? Well, black also has his trumps here. The knight is excellent. And I mean, the structure, apart from the little weakness on the king side, is virtually symmetrical. So it should be okay for black with some care. Knight e4 is a good move. Now, of course, if the knight takes on a3, then queen a1, and we've got a little tactical hit there. So instead, queen c6 from Fabiano. So he's now connected the rooks. Knight fd2, very logical, exchanging off this active piece. And now, well, I think Fabiano can equalize pretty easily simply by playing rook fd8. I mean, it's not a complicated move, looks very logical. And if knight takes knight, exchange rooks, recapture, And I mean, perhaps he was worried that this pawn would become a weakness. In fact, well, white has to be even a little bit careful sometimes. So first of all, rook c1 to take care of the pawn. And now an important move, f5. If the knight retreats, then black is absolutely fine. I mean, this bishop now protects the king, puts pressure here. But I think after f5, a very logical continuation would be queen a1 check along the long diagonal. So the king moves to the side. Check on f6. Okay, this gets taken. The pawn advances. Now, if a rook could join in the attack here, or a pawn very quickly get to h6, that would be another matter. But here, well, white has nothing better than just to give perpetual check, actually. Like this. And that's a draw straight away, perpetual check. Well, of course, you can interpose with the queen, but well, you risk losing that precious pawn there. But yeah, it's basically just a draw. But instead, Fabiano played queen b7, and this looks like an error of judgment, because after this trade, this one's a bit different. Now white has more control in the position, and well, you can see this rook on the open file. You know, there's potential there. I mean, on a good day coming down to d7, but also coming to d4. I mean, my machine thinks that h6 is a good move here. Sometimes that allows the king to come to a better square after f5. But you know, this is a tricky move to see. And then f5 in this position, and black can probably hold the balance. But you know, h6 is not an obvious move. Instead, Fabiano played queen c6. Mamedyarov starting to round up that pawn. So Fabi tries to break these nice pawns here, but he's not in time. After knight d2, this pawn is dropping basically. So the game went rook g8. Oh yeah, incidentally, if queen b5, then after this trade, black isn't actually losing material. However, after we don't exchange on b4, but after a4, this is incredibly dangerous. So the knight can stop the b pawn, but this a pawn is really dangerous, and the king can come across very, very quickly and round up the b pawn. Must be winning for white. So knight d2 played, rook g8, threatening a mate, but g3, that cures that one. An exchange here, rook c4, and now, well, black should probably just play like this, and black's a pawn down, but can fight, but not a nice position. But instead, Fabiano played b3, but this really doesn't improve matters, and actually black is just completely lost here. And Mamedyarov's technique was excellent. He very sensibly traded down and just held the position, and with this passed a pawn. Well, this one didn't last too much longer. Let me just show you the final moves. So here, Caruana resigned. The queen is just coming here, and well, with queen and knight together, the pawn is going to go home. Bad game from Fabiano. He's having a really rough tournament. Yeah, one feels that maybe he's keeping his powder dry for the candidates. Maybe he's not playing openings that he's particularly comfortable with. That's possible. Okay, moving on. Let me show you another odd mistake. Wesley So against Adhiban Bascaran. Wesley's been better for most of this game, but Adhiban was fighting hard. You can see that Wesley has an extra pawn. But here, if black waits, waits with the rook, excuse me, then he has pretty decent drawing chances. But he simply played King G6. That's how he waited. But this was a mistake, because suddenly this allowed G4, trading these pawns, and that makes life so much simpler for white. Because now this pawn can advance, and crucially, white doesn't have to look after this G pawn, and also it gives white extra room. This rook can often swing round and encircle. Basically, black is just completely lost here. Let me show you the game continuation. A check. Here, the king's on the back rank. It's absolutely horrible, and the pawn advances. And I'm afraid there is absolutely nothing for black to do in this position. It's completely losing. Well, yeah, I mean, you can see if King C8, then you could just play Rook D6, and King pawn ending is winning, and otherwise you can snaffle pawn number 2. So A5 played. This is of course desperation. Let's just see the very end of the game. And the king comes forward to advance, to help the pawn advance, but that didn't help either. So yeah, unlucky for Adhiban. Just a careless move, you know, after 66 moves. Magnus also made a pretty bad mistake. It wasn't fatal though. In this position, well, this game is drifting towards a draw. Afterwards, Magnus said that, yeah, my white games have been fairly disastrous. Magnus got no advantage with white again. Here he saw, of course, that he could just play Rook C1, but thought, well, this is just heading towards a draw. Well, this is true. The Rook will come back here and the position looks completely equal. Instead, he played B5. And after this, then he played Rook C1, and he completely overlooked that Kramnik could take this pawn. And suddenly, Magnus had to defend this rook and pawn endgame. Well, he managed to do it after 30 odd moves. His technique is very good, but unpleasant to have to suffer in an endgame a pawn down. So there we have it. Let me give you the scores. So there were 3 decisive games today. Mamedyarov defeated Caruana, Svidler defeated Yifan, and Wesley defeated Adhiban. The rest of the games were draws. Jones and Giri, Matlakov and Karyakin, and Anand and Wei. Well, those games really didn't last very long. They were a bit boring. And yes, we've just seen Carlsen drew with Kramnik after some sweat. So that leaves Giri, Anand and Mamedyarov in the lead on 3.5 points. Kramnik, Carlsen, So a half point behind on 3. And at the bottom of the tournament, Hou Yifan with half, Adhiban with 1, and Fabiano Caruana only 1.5 points out of 5. Incredible. Thursday is a rest day. I think the players need it after that round. And in round 6, top pairings are Anish Giri against Anand, so battle of the top players, and Adhiban against Mamedyarov.